Hi, this is Rob Garland with Real World Guitar, and today my guest is Neil Carter. Now, Neil's a multi-instrumentalist and a great singer, and he's been in bands such as Wild Horses and UFO. But the focus of my interview today is the years he spent with Gary Moore. We talked in depth about his co-writing credits, touring, and experiences playing keyboards and guitar and singing in Gary Moore's band. Hope you enjoy the interview. So before we talk about your time with Gary Moore, which is kind of the main focus of today, I wanted to first of all start off, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your musical upbringing.
I learned, as we all did, the piano and the recorder when I was very young. And then I picked up the clarinet when I went to senior school. And the clarinet has remained with me constantly for all these years, and in fact it's the one instrument that I play regularly. So I play in the municipal bands here, so yes, and that was it. And it was fine, and I had a career sort of mapped out as a classical musician until I discovered rock music, and I discovered like Queen, and I discovered the Sweet, and Mark Bolan and David Bowie and all that, and then my focus shifted away from what I was doing. So I had a place at music, further education for music, and just threw it away because I wanted to go and be a rock star. That's what I wanted to do. Not that I ever achieved it, but at least that was the thing behind it. So, but there was always music in the house. So there was always, my mother was a great fan of musical theatre, and my dad loved Beethoven and all these, sort of classic composers. So it was always around.
And a lot of kids start piano early, but then they leave it alone, don't they? So it's interesting. Did you continue piano right through until you sort of got into rock band?
It's always there in the background, I suppose. It was something. Yeah. I've never been a particularly proficient pianist. I mean, I'm a capable pianist, but I never took it to a very, very high level. It was the clarinet, it was wind instruments.
Were you exposed to Benny Goodman and jazz?
Yeah, I like big band jazz. Through my career, I've always done, when I was teaching, I'm talking about 25 years, and I was in a school in Brighton, and I did have a swing band and a couple of swing bands actually, and that was all big band jazz and all that sort of thing. So I did, although I took on the saxophone, became a bit of a beast, but the saxophone became the thing that I ended up doing a lot more of, even though I'm not really mad about the saxophone, but that's what I ended up teaching a lot.
So a lot of people that ended up in that sort of 80s rock world didn't come from that background, so that gives you some gives you a bit more depth perhaps for composition and some other ideas as well.
I mean, I left when I was 16 of school. I was 16, and I went straight into a job. Did a job. So my parents didn't want me doing nothing, but I was in bands by that point and playing. And it was only a couple of years before I got my first sort of break.
Was that Gilbert O'Sullivan?
Yeah, O'Sullivan, that's it. I was with a sort of semi-professional because they were, but I didn't by that point. But I was with a band of the sort of Queen wannabes. And we did an audition for Gilbert, and he took the whole band. But I was the singer, so I got landed in all the things that I could do. So I ended up playing the flute, the clarinet, guitar, acoustic guitar, keyboard, singing. So in 45 minutes, I think I played 6 instruments. It was quite hard. It's quite hard actually, to be honest. But it was a good grounding, for what I was. It sort of made me decide what I really wanted to do, which is rock music.
You've kind of been hired as somebody that can do, more than one thing, haven't you? It's always been guitar, keyboards, vocals, and so on.
Yeah, they call us utility men.
Right.
I actually hate it. You sort of. I mean, I'm a good second lieutenant. I've never had the desire to be centre stage. I find my power comes from doing what I do, I just enjoy it, and to the point that I just enjoy. I've always enjoyed audiences. I always enjoyed showing off. Like I used to say, I always enjoyed showing off because that's what once you've done all the work, then you can go and have fun.
One of the things that we were taken by when we were watching as kids, because we had those Gary Moore videos, the '84, the '87, just wore them out, And one thing I was always taken by is how your live performance was like. You were really into it. I never understand when I see a band just stand like this. I've never understood that. For me, music is such a life force, right? That it's almost impossible to not be moving around and getting into it.
I noticed people like Pete Way, I don't know, people that had real stage personas. And
Yeah.
it's always something that I really enjoy. And I don't know really. I would say that you do all the hard work in the studio and rehearsal studio, and then once you get out, you've got to sell it. You've got to entertain. I hate this thing of people just looking at their feet. I can't cope with it.
No, I can't either.
Even though it's very worthy, and they're probably 100 times better musicians than I am, but I like the idea of just entertaining. I think the entertainment thing. That's why I like people like Queen and Bowie and Roxy Music, that they were entertaining as they went. So they've got fantastic work, but then they entertain the audience. And Queen were masters of that.
And there was something sort of larger than life about it as well, wasn't it? Like they were sort of superheroes up there, you know.
And also, I think really when you're looking back at those days, particularly something like that 87 concert with Gary in Sweden, there's no video screens and there's no, you're really little dots. So you've got to be a bit larger than life. You can't just, if you just stood there, it'd be bloody boring.
Exactly.
15,000, yeah. So you've got to project it, you've got to sell it, so and that's what they really enjoy, because then the audience enjoy it. That's, you're there for them, you're not there for you. You're there.
To sound like an old person moaning, but there was none of this with the phones then.
To me, actually, even when I went back with Gary in 2010, that came as a bit of a surprise. And then when I went to a phone on that last bit, I couldn't believe, and they were doing it and going straight to Facebook. So all your sins were finding you out as time, but I found that quite interesting. And Phil Mark hates it. He can't stand it. But actually, having said that, a lot of good things have come out that you can actually see from the audience, particularly with the UFO stuff. It's classic. It's lovely to have, because we're not going to have that anymore. So it's really, it's nice to have those things and keep them.
As we get a little bit nearer to the 80s, you obviously were in Wild Horses, and being a big Thin Lizzy fan, that's obviously a connection there. And then, of course, UFO. How did the Wild Horses thing come about?
I answered, there was an ad. Remember Sam's?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
In the back of Sam's, there was a gossip column, and it said, Brian Robertson and Jimmy Bain and Kenny Jones, at that point, of The Who, were looking for a young, fresh guitarist to complete their lineup. And I thought, that's me. I remember, and I rang and I got an audition with them. And in fact, I didn't have a particular sort, to be honest, but it was almost an instant connection. And so I did an audition. I did an audition with them. And then by the time we got onto the rehearsals, Kenny had left, and we got Dixie Lee, who was with Paul Champion and stuff. And that was the beginning of it, really. I mean, it was a bit of a white knuckle ride, They were rock and roll with a cut and a half, and I was very young, very sort of naive. I don't know really. It's just but it was a very good grounding for me. It was they were very good to take on someone that was relatively new to it, by at that point. But it definitely was a baptism of fire. Well, so yeah. But, I mean, to me, it was a big step up, because I think by the time I left Wild Horses, I've got to the stage where I sort of realised it wasn't going to be going anywhere particularly, and I was quite young, and I just thought, now it's and then the UFO thing just happened to come along, and again I did a little run through with them, and that was it.
What was the connection through Wild Horses to UFO?
No, was that through Phil Collins of Girl? Hang out with Phil quite a lot, and he recommended me to Phil Mark. And they were so funny. I mean, looking back on it, it was just hilarious. It was 3 years, 2 years of hilarity and 1 year of pain. It's a great, it's great to be able to write songs. I've never written songs before, so that was really good for me, and to actually do something and write some songs and see them recorded and whatever. So regardless of whatever the dreadful deal was, it was still nice to actually. Phil says we never asked for accounts, did we?
No.
So you're slightly wiser in this day and age,
What are the chances? Like, what if you hadn't seen that issue or whatever,
I must, and it was, like I said, it was in a gossip column. It wasn't even an ad. But And I love Thin Lizzy. I really did love Thin.
Oh yeah.
But I just thought, this would be ideal for me. But I also thought like Rainbow as well. So
Yeah. Did you spend any time with Phil?
Quite a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Phil used to come to Wild Horses gigs, and he'd get up and play, and Scott would as well. In fact, it was a real thing in Thin Lizzy, the Thin Lizzy bubble, where you'd always get someone coming up and playing. So, and even with Gary, we also had someone come up and play if it was wherever we were, they were hanging around. So we had, some very strange choices along the way. But it looked like a jam in the end, even Michael Schenker. And that the only time I ever met Michael Schenker was when he got other Wild Horses and played, so that was the thing. But they were high maintenance.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm really grateful that they gave me my first break, because I think they, I give them credit for that. And I'm still a little bit in contact with Brian. I occasionally.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
After
UFO, I think you first joined Gary in 1983. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so, how did that come about? First of all.
Right. Okay. Well, then tour manager had worked for Wild Horses, and he was hanging around, and UFO had made it very clear that was it. And so Andy and Paul and I went and did some demos, but it was, they're only interested really in the focal point, which is the same, and I can quite understand that. And Phil was the man, he was a UFO. So I think at the last concert with UFO, I had a couple of people standing either side of the stage. One of them was this guy, and then from another band on the other side, and they were saying, would you be interested? Well, one of them I didn't take seriously, but Gary, I thought, because Gary's career was really up and coming, and I knew Gary's playing, and I'd met Gary once before. It's a very long story, but he actually had me ordered out of the rehearsal room because I shouldn't have been in there. Gary was really funny about things like that. And he said, come in, Gary, come sit in. And this was with G-Force. Hated having anyone that he didn't know. And so at that point, I don't think I'd even join Wild Horses. So Gary was always a bit, I wouldn't say he's intimidated, but he always, this look that Gary had about, sort of sternish look. And I just thought, I'll go because it's fine, So that was really how it came about, was through this tournament, And again, I just went for a run through.
Yeah.
But he needed someone, because Don had gone off to do something or other. I did White Sound a Baby. And they needed someone to do the Def Leppard tour in America. So we started somewhere or other in Pittsburgh, something like that.
Okay.
And it was only really meant to be for that tour.
Right.
Yeah. And then Gary and I got on really well. So it worked.
Did he remember that he exited you from that?
It was like one of those stupid stories. It was kind of, do you remember? So that was quite amusing. But we did we sort of hit it off, and by the end of the tour, it was almost like a permanent thing. By the end of the tour,
and then you started work on Victims of the Future.
Yeah. And in fact, the demos that I'd done with Paul and Andy from UFO, one of the tracks came out as Murder in the Skies. So Paul and I decided to split them between us. And so one of the tracks was Murder in the Sky. So that's where that riff all comes from.
I see.
Because that was my riff. And so the Gary said to me, have you got anything, Gary really was quite self-sufficient. He didn't really need another writer, but he was always very generous, and he sort of he always would ask me what I got, and I would give him things, and he would read through all my rubbish and come up with a couple of things, So so it's quite, that's really how we work.
Title track, Victims of the Future, and obviously Empty Rooms, which is a huge one. So when you would bring a song like, let's say, Victims of the Future or Murder in the Skies, when you would bring that in, would the two of you work on the arrangement, and who did the lyrics, or was it different from song to song?
Always did the lyrics. Did the lyrics. Except there's a little bit of Blood of Vengeance that I did, but actually Gary was always the lyricist, because I suppose theoretically he's got to sing.
Right.
I did some of it live. Yeah. Gary, I always think it's a very personal thing if you're singing something. So he would do the lyrics, and I would give him the ideas, the riffs that I had, and we would work on them together. Then he would go off and do his Gary-ness, because so Empty Rooms was an idea I'd had when I was with UFO, that I just kept. And so that actual beginning bit, and it was the first thing I ever recorded with Gary, because we went to a barge on the Thames, which was owned by Richard Branston, and I had the multi-track that I'd done, and Gary noodled around and sung a bit on it. So that was the genesis of Empty Rooms. Yeah. But it served me well over the years.
It got sort of reimagined a couple of times by Gary as well, right? There's an early version where you're playing the intro that he usually plays, you're playing it on the piano. So there's like different, so obviously all those melodies were already there, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it sort of morphed and then settled. I think that's the word it's saying. Victims of the Future version, which was then cut down for a single. And then when it came, and that didn't really do very much, but the song is so good. You know, it's not false modesty. I mean, Gary did a lot of it. But it's, I think it was worth reimagining, you know, with, you know, when Peter Collins came on board. So,
yeah, definitely.
A lot of things, you know. But I very rarely listen to, you know, those albums. So I did actually the other day, I put on Victims of the Future just to remind myself.
Yeah.
You know, what they all sound like, all the tunes sound like, you know.
Yeah.
All I notice is the singing is very high. All the pitch is really high.
Oh, especially Victims of the Future, the song. Yeah. You know better than I do. But I think in later years, Gary sort of thought about that a bit more, right? You know, like maybe that was a little high on the range.
I was quite amazed because I had to sing it for this tribute thing that Bob did. Actually, how high Empty Rooms is. And the fact that when out of that last bit, when he really wasn't very well, he could still hit all those high notes. You know?
Right.
And I don't think I could. You know, I found it really hard to actually sing it in the proper key. It was hard work, you know. So,
yeah.
And today I felt like I was fiddling around with all messed up.
Yeah.
And this stratospheric beat flats, and you know, I don't know how we did it. You know, I have no idea how we did it.
Right, yeah, the power of youth. So you brought in a chord progression, such as Empty Rooms or whatever. Was there ever a discussion from you and Gary about any music theory behind it, or was it always just kind of ear? Like, did you ever say this is a 2-chord, or you know, any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, we didn't really. Not really. No, I mean, I mean, obviously I can notate and I can, you know, because I've got that background. Gary didn't really have that, but he had the intellect to know what was what, you know. So Gary was amazing. He had perfect pitch, he had perfect meter, you know. I mean, which made him quite difficult to work for, especially for drummers.
Yes.
You know, he would be obsessed by the meter. You know, and yeah, so we sort of did. It didn't, but he was very good on. He just instinctive. He was instinctive on jazz chords. You know, anything really. He could just pick it up and do it. You know, he wasn't trained. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't trained. But he just had that sort of mind and that brain.
For me, growing up, it was the melodic sensibility of the improvisation is really the thing that I think like kept pulling me back in, because nobody played that melodically.
No, that's true. I mean, you know, that's the thing about Gary. He would have, and I've noticed actually that it's a little bit, in a very small way, has rubbed off on me, because I did on Phil Mugg's album. Just thinking, there's possibly a bit more Gary. You know, I couldn't hold myself up against Gary, but you know, it's just the way you phrase and shape things, and you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to rub off, though, hasn't it? You know, you're hearing so much of that. You know,
it's the technique of rub off. Yeah.
Did he ever sit down and show you a thing or two, or vice versa?
But the funny thing is, actually, I mean, I felt it was quite weird, because he didn't actually have a lot of guitar players play alongside him. You know, so I actually felt quite pleased that he actually let me, you know, sort of play the guitar a lot. But I remember trying to teach him something, and I'm a bit slightly dyslexic. So if I don't see something written down, I find it quite hard to listen and pick something up. Just I don't get it, you know. So I can remember him sort of getting frustrated with me, because I couldn't remember what bloody this thing was, you know. And even with you know, UFOs, rock bottom, you know,
cool.
With Vinnie Moore doing it, I did really, you know, play it again and again and again, these harmonies, to make sure that I didn't write. I just think it's not something that comes naturally to me. No, I just have to I just have to do it, and if I do it, I do it. And that's fine, But no, we didn't really discuss things like technical and that sort of thing. No, not really.
Yeah. After the Victims of the Future and you do the tour, do you have any memories of because growing up in England, obviously Donington was a huge deal, right? Do you have any memories of that one where it was Van Halen, Gary Moore, Ozzy?
My uncle was there, and he took lots of pictures from the back, and so I've got some pictures of me on stage. I sort of remember. I can remember the gig. I can remember it being disgusting on the stage because people were throwing bottles of weed.
Oh yeah.
Thinking, this is not nice. Don't like this. Don't like this. But actually, the reaction from the crowd was always, was good. I mean, they liked you. I mean, they were throwing about Ozzy. Needing to throw Ozzy. Even though they loved Ozzy. Don Airy tells a story about Donington that he thought that we weren't capturing the crowd, and then we played empty rooms, and then it all kicked off. I don't remember that at all. I just remember that it being one of our first gigs was called Thompson on drums.
Yeah.
It being for all of us a bit of a wind-up ride, because you're playing. You've maybe done one gig or two gigs. We played the Marquee, I think. So again, we've got a new drummer for the 19th time. So it's just getting used to playing with someone. So but no, I remember it just being a hell of a day. Fantastic.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Amazing.
Now I'd actually stood and watched Van Halen because I didn't, and I wish I had. I watched Motley Crue.
When you first started touring with Gary, did the two of you hang out after shows a lot and stuff? I mean, was it quite sociable?
I think we did. We did. I mean, obviously on the tour bus, which something you have to get on. So we used to be, we used to be on the tour bus, and because we had Ian Pace.
Yeah.
Was the granddaddy of them all, and I knew Neil Murray really well.
Right.
So it was quite nice to just sit. And it was just something. I mean, we paid 40 minutes. I mean, it's nothing, is it? Really?
Yeah.
Right. And then Crocus came on and did a quick, quick out the door. I mean, Def Leppard.
Yeah.
5 years previously, they had bought the gearing for Wild Horses in Sheffield, at the Limit Club in Sheffield. And I was just thinking, this was 5 years ago. Carrying out cabinets in, they did so well, and I wouldn't begrudge it them because it just hit the right time with the right album and the right producer, and it was really good for them, But it was slightly ironic, and I thought to myself, these are places that UFO had headlines on them, and I thought, well, if Ian Pace can do this, I could do this. But it was nice to play with Gary.
And then, of course, in December of '84, you played the Island shows that became the Emerald Isles VHS. People watching this might not understand if they're not of the same age, but those VHSs were huge for us because it was like, you might see something in a magazine, you might get an occasional BBC Radio Live thing, but that was really the only way, unless you were going to the show, that was really the only way to see bands there.
No, in fact, they're pretty good. I mean, the one in Ireland is pretty incredible, really, actually, for the time. The outfits are a bit dubious. It's great having Paul Thompson on that, because Paul Thompson was he's a beefy player.
He looks it, doesn't he?
I mean, Bob back as well. And then the Ice Stadium one is just iconic. I think it's one of those. Gary is very best. Really on fire. And it's just the audience and everything. And it's a great sadness to me that they've never released them.
I wore out the VHS, 3 DVD bootlegs of it, and it drives me crazy that the family have never put that out as a nice quality DVD. So when I was at MI, I meet people all the time that had the same reaction I did to that concert, life-changing, really.
I mean, for of its time, and everything about it, it's quite steamy, really. It's good. And it was a one take as well, So about just after Gary died, there was a journalist from Sweden who I was always in contact with, and he was interviewed me for liner notes for a supposedly re-release. But something happened, and it was something like technical, legal, whatever, and they've never been able to do it. But it's a great sadness to me because I'm sure it would do really well. It was the biggest selling video in Sweden, apparently. I've got a disc that tells me it was the biggest selling video in Sweden. But it would be great to have both of those.
It would.
And there was more of the concert as well. That's the other thing. That's not what the concert is about for the full thing.
Soundboards and bootlegs from that tour, and of course, The Shapes of Things was in the set, right?
I think I haven't looked at it for a while, but it's probably on set list of them what we played. I can't.
Yeah.
It goes in one area out the other.
Oh, the thing about the '84 video is you've got, I think it was David Kid Jensen doing the narration. It's almost like a sort of an advert for Ireland as well.
Yes, but not as good. And please forgive me, any Irish people. The original one was an Irishman. Oh, Gary Moore comes back to the Emerald Isle.
Oh, that's great.
We were crying when we saw the original film.
Yeah.
It was just so camp, so kitsch.
I would love to see
done by an American company, somebody
right.
NHL, and they thought it'd be great to have a traditional Irish man doing the soundtrack, but of course it just didn't work.
Right.
So eventually they replaced it with Kid Jensen doing it. But but the first time that we just think, oh come on. It's like they drag this poor man, this bog Irish man out, and then people aren't like that, they're really not, most people are, So to be careful what I say, I get hate mail. But anyway, that was the original idea.
That period, the Run for Cover album, and of course, like we said, the sort of reimagining of Empty Rooms. Did you have some input in that version of that?
We did it in LA. The backing tracks in LA was Peter Collins.
Yeah.
And then they added all the fairy dust. I mean, Gary used, there was a guy called Andy Richards who worked with Pet Shop Boys, and he had fairy dust. So a lot of the time, what I did tends to be the very basic stuff, and then eventually it would get superseded by the expensive. We always said it's the expensive stuff. So the expensive stuff, because that's how Peter Collins worked. And so Gary be along with that. But so there's some of me on there for the Richards.
So you had All Messed Up on there as well, right? Was another
cover
for you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you need to have a trust to sing. And what else is on there? Run for Cover, and also Reach for the Sky.
Yeah.
Country Man. They're all in fact, some of those sort of endured even onto that final tour. A couple of those songs endured onto.
Yeah. And of course, Out in the Fields, which was a huge as well,
So, and of course, Philip was involved in that.
Yes, and Military Man was a great song that you kept going with.
That I think came from Grand Slam. I think it was one of those songs that's got, because it's got Lawrence Archer on it as a credit. So I think it was one that Phil provided, and that came from his stuff with Grand Slam, I think.
In between a tour and so let's say, after that wrapped up, before the start of Wild Frontier and everything, would you and Gary get together on the off time and write?
We used to have long breaks. Once I had 18 months off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I think he would, I'd go to his house, and then occasionally we might go to, with the final album, we went to Dublin for a month, and we worked on stuff in Dublin for after the war. With Wild Frontier is probably the one I have the least input on. There's a bit of me on Thunder Rising and a bit of me on something else. But actually that was Gary doing a lot with Peter Collins and a lot with other people.
I think did you co-write Strangers in the Darkness on that
That's
one?
it, yeah, apparently. Yeah, I don't know what
apparently.
I couldn't even tell you what I did on that. But so I think the last band type album was really Run for Cover, where you'd have people standing in the studio.
Right.
Whereas then we got into Wild Frontier, where it was the sample drums, and it was more constructed. But we would always demo the song. So I would go to Gary's house and we would demo stuff, and he might have demoed Wild Frontier, say, and I would add some keyboards on because he could play a little bit, but he had very flat fingers when he played the piano.
Right.
Like this would be played, it was he wasn't really a natural pianist,
I'd love to hear some of those demos.
There must be somewhere, but again, over the years, we did them on funny little recording things, everything.
Yeah.
8 tracks, so.
At the time, that obviously was a very popular thing to do, but looking back, it's quite a bold thing to not have live drummer on Wild Frontier.
Yeah.
I know there's some samples on there and stuff, but it was quite for me, that's why I love the '87 concerts so much, because it's those songs brought to life a little bit more with Eric Singer on that stuff as well. Thunder Rising is a really classic Celtic sounding, Gary Moore song.
I think the thing is, like I said, Gary, because he had perfect meter, it would annoy the hell out of him if a drummer sped up or slowed down. Mostly speeding up, because that's what tends to happen, because it's the excitement of it. And then, which, poor old Eric, if you listen to, I mean, you used to call Eric all sorts of names, because Eric would get carried away. Eric was incarnate. It was the best incarnation for me, was with Eric, Bob, and Gary. Best band. But for Gary, I think he preferred Gary Ferguson, because Gary Ferguson's more sort of not solid, but I mean, he just kept it in pocket, whereas Eric's just really good player. But occasionally you would just get excited and it would just move on. If you listen to Thunder Rising, it does move on very slightly, and that's the sort of thing that Gary didn't cope with very well, because it all had to let the guitar sit. So if Gary didn't feel the guitar could sit over what he was playing, which is why I kept everything so simple. Bob was the ideal bass player, because Bob wasn't fussy, and so it just allowed the guitar to be comfortable. And I'm seriously thinking now, I realised it was like a light bulb moment years later, and I just thought that's why he was so picky about drummers and picky about them, because it was all, if it compromised how he felt about how the guitar sat, that would get under his skin, and I don't blame him. I mean, it's just one of the things, but I still think it was the best one.
Colosseum too, and in later years, it seemed like Gary was wandering, at least like on his own time, wandering into some jazz vocabulary, and so you would think, in a way, that he would like the interplay.
Yes, it was quite a mystery to me how Gary went from after the war, which was a very strict time.
Yeah.
Was to the next album,
Still Got the Blues, right?
Blues, which was meant to be a freer sort of sounding. I never quite got it. It went to a feel-based thing from that.
Yeah.
It was just what he needed. I think it was probably what he needed.
But
it was. I remember thinking, God, it's sharp, right-hand turn. But that was. I mean, that's what makes people brilliant.
From an outsider's point of view, it definitely seemed like he was going to follow his muse no matter what. And it wasn't necessarily like the record company thinks I should do this or do that,
I mean, a great movie it was, really. I mean, it was immaculate, because he built the career up to that point, and then the blues album just took off.
Yeah.
And good on him, good. It was,
sure,
it was a good thing. I went to see it. I went to see him in Brighton, and I was just shocked because there was not one track that we, I had this bravery to go and play.
Oh, absolutely.
Material. I might have done Prison Waters, I'm not sure, but apart from that, not one. I just said, man, it's brave of you to do that. But it's Gary. Gary would do that sort of thing. He was, and then I mean, it wouldn't be for me.
Sure.
Blues wouldn't be for me, but I think it was what he felt he needed to do.
Yeah. And on the drummers thing, I remember reading an interview with Gary Husband that played with him later on, and they sort of clashed because there was a song that Gary wanted super straight. And of course, Gary, who's a phenomenal jazz pianist as well as drummer, and they were, because he felt they should have that interplay. So it carried on. It was an interesting thing, even into past the blues years,
I've seen people in tears, grown men cry, like Ian Pace.
Yeah. I mean, come on, yeah.
He just got under his, into his ears. And we were doing Hold On to Love in the studio. And poor Ian, Gary sat there with a metronome.
Oh, wow.
Going along. It was like, and it was just every take, it was like, I was just going thinking, no. And I just felt so sorry for him. But, Ian's a bigger man than that, So, he didn't, but it was obviously, and then what was weird was he got Bobby Chenard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rainbow, right? Yeah.
It was like a sort of bag of laundry. Bobby was the most wonderful guy, but he was Keith Mooney, and that to me, again, how does that work? And Bobby came and played with him perfectly, it's quite happy with the timing. And Bobby was like this, whereas Ian's a very technical player. So it's something about it in the book. I've read something about it that Ian said that it just was, he was hitting too hard and he was just throwing his meter and he just lost it for a while.
Great drummers like Ian Pace, particularly in that sort of British tradition like Ginger Baker and stuff. they have a swing feel in their rocks,
It's a
don't
swing,
they? You know? And so when you think about a metronome, it's not always necessarily going to work like that.
No, I mean, it's a very hard gig. It was a very hard gig. And in fact, there were, I think I counted, it was 14 drummers that I played with, even, going into the modern stuff as well. That is not the ones that we auditioned. We auditioned probably twice, maybe more than that, sort of people and big name players as well. And it's amazing that the amount of people, it's just something that was the core of Gary's being, that, it had the drumming, had to be right. I mean, it's quite interesting, a bit of an insight into.
And for band member auditions, were you involved in the say of that?
We always generally, I mean, obviously it came down to it at the end, but we would discuss it. So it would be between myself and Bob usually. I mean, you're looking about people like, I wouldn't say we played, but I mean, even with someone like Cozy Powell, that was such a shame because Cozy was a mammoth drummer, but it just didn't work because Cozy wanted to play it Cozy way, and Gary wanted it exactly as he'd written it on the album, and that's why it didn't work, And I used to think it was ego. In fact, it's not ego. I can see it now. Cozy was his own man, so so he didn't want to be told to play this fill, which didn't feel right for him to play as Cozy Powell.
And on a personal note, as you brought up Cozy Powell, and so we had tickets to the beginning of the After the War tour in Folkestone, of all places.
Oh, lucky place. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, right. And Gary had a falling out with Cozy right before that. And two of those dates got cancelled, one of them being, and I was so, he came back a year later and started the blues tour there. So I saw the blues tour there and it was amazing. Would have loved to have seen the After the War.
Yeah, no. I mean, I can remember the rehearsals. I just remember it being quite awkward, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. I was unfortunate, but I think Gary, he used to get like things in his mind. And that was it. And it was like, that's it. You could tell the end was nigh. So we had Chris Slade to do the. I don't think there's anything wrong with Chris's drumming. I never really connected with him personally.
Okay.
Yeah. Not because I didn't like him, but it's just that I just did two different people. It was not quite the same feeling. I would have had Eric back, if it had been down to me, I would have got Eric back. But I think by that point he was doing his Badlands.
He was, on that 87 tour. Did you have any, you or Bob or Eric have any input on the set list, or was that all Gary?
Sometimes they write themselves.
Yeah.
You and again, we would discuss it. I mean, it was down to really just pacing, I suppose, and what works pacing wise. But we did. I mean, we would discuss it. I think Gary, at the root of it, liked being in a band, even though it was Gary Moore. He liked the idea that it was a band. So therefore, we all were given sort of equal. If we had an opinion, we would say it. And Bob and Gary got on really well. They never across the road. Bob could do no wrong. I did occasionally wrong, but spotless in what we did.
Back to the 87 for a second. So when you talk about the interaction, so one of my favorite things was obviously the fact that the Military Man middle section, empty rooms, which a lot of people regard as the second solo as like the most melodic solo ever played, right? And of course the Loner, which on some of those dates, 25 minutes long, it's the middle of that song where it's just you and Gary, and he's playing and he's looking to you and cueing each other on the court. I mean, that must have been a really special moment on that tour.
It was quite a nice way to finish it because you can actually then relax. I'd have a drink there, so one hand over, quick drink. Because I mean, at the end of that, there's only 4 chords. He's just doing this 4 chord thing, and then he would build it up. And you're right, 25 minutes, 22 minutes.
Yeah.
I did time it myself one night, and I think it was a little bit 22 minutes. Yeah. But again, it's what people wanted to hear, And you sort of get. It's very weird. Someone said to me about playing with Gary, and how God, that must have been amazing every single night. It's a shame. It's a bit like having caviar every day or something like that. That you just in the edge, you don't notice it sometimes. You don't notice what's going on next to you, or you can hear because you're concentrating on what you're doing, and you just get used to just, I mean, to be honest, the sheer brilliance of it, you just get used to it, you know. And I tend not to listen to guitar players when I'm playing. I'll be concentrating on other things, but I'm aware of it. But you know, and in some of the final dates, you know, there's some nights when it was really good, and I'd say, you know, Gary, the solos were brilliant tonight, you know, really, really good. And you know, so that was, you know, you did get these flashes of absolute brilliance, but you do get used to it after a while. You do get used to playing with someone like that. So you know, it's a weird thing, but you do.
That makes complete sense, because it's that thing where you're going to have an ear on that, but you're a professional doing your job. You want to connect with the audience. You want to be present. And I always felt you and Gary's vocals live blended beautifully.
Yeah, people used to say they couldn't, if they were miles away, they weren't sure who was doing what.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it did. I mean, actually, I think that was the thing that Gary found the best thing about having me there, was the vocal side of it. You know? I mean, I'm not the best keyboard player. I get by, but I would do what was fitting for the job. The guitar, I've always enjoyed playing a lot more.
Yeah.
You know, and even though I'm not of that caliber, I still quite enjoy. I just enjoyed running around. The singing was what I think kept him having me there, because it worked really, really well. You know, I wasn't ever going to take over from him, you know, but I could complement it, and that was working really, really well.
In that time, was it you had the Hamer guitars? Is that correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I don't know where it became of those. I'm sure I did a cull about 1991. I thought, I'm never doing this again.
Right.
So I sold everything, and then I had another cull in about 2012. I just thought, I'm never going to be doing this again. So and I began teaching. But so the Hamers went there. Oh, it's sad, really, actually. I had a blue one, it's really nice blue Hamer, which is a shame. I'm sort of sad. And of course, when I went back with UFO, not so much with Gary, because I still had my Les Paul. But when I went back to UFO, I needed to go. I hadn't got a guitar. I had to go find some guy down in one of the resorts, who was selling the Gibson Nighthawk, and it was the closest I could get to a decent guitar.
Okay.
So I had nothing at all. I had no keyboards.
Wow.
You know, so it was a bit of a sort of sudden rush round to go and get things. You know, I do have guitars now, but
gear for a second. So obviously Gary changed his setups a bit through the years. You know, I love the single humbucker Charvel Marshall era. That's like my favorite, you know. But is that something you would see a lot, like him tinkering with gear and changing setups and guitars and things?
Just guitars, very interesting. And in fact, I don't know if they're still there because they've sold a lot of it, but one of the rehearsal studios, there were two massive cages packed to the guns of guitar. And Gary would buy guitars every week. He'd buy guitar. Maybe two, you know, because that's what he loved doing. He loved getting new instruments and whatever, you know. So so he would tinker a lot with that sort of stuff.
Did you ever discuss, you know, like the guitars you were playing and amps versus his for frequencies and how that would work together?
Not really. I mean, I kept with a Marshall 50 stack. That's what I would be happy with. I didn't give myself too much in one hearing context. So, and then Gary would have a monitor of my guitar on his side. So he could actually remember the foot problem. He could get the keyboards or the guitar where he wanted it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So the guitars, I tended to tag along. I mean, we had 5 of those. I've got a few of them. The Hamers, I've got a few of them. I mean, I didn't pay for a guitar for a long time, thanks to Gary. And we had these other things. But then I had the Les Paul on the final tour, which he gave me for a birthday present.
Oh, that's nice. I
sat in the cupboard for 20 years. Sort of got these guitars now. I do play them because I've been doing stuff with Phil Mark. But, you know, this is probably, I will keep them out now. I'm going to keep playing guitar.
Yeah.
We'll keep playing a little bit.
No more culls.
I will be not culling.
Gary obviously had this reputation for quite loud stage volume with his guitar.
Actually, when we did that final gig, which was at the Kremlin Palace in Moscow, and I hadn't realised how bloody loud it was. It was 100. He had 100 watt, you know, pretty full kilter, and they had these things that are corralled off for the oligarchy lot, you know, the very Russians. They always did them like this, like flinching, you know, because it was just
my goodness,
fighting right into them. It was pretty loud. It was. And also, Gary lost hearing. He had, we all have tinnitus to a degree. But I think Gary lost a bit of his hearing. and so it was very loud
Mm.
and quite present, and it was So I mean, I would stay over where I would mostly I was on the keyboard, so I would have a little bit of Gary in my monitor.
Yeah.
I didn't try. I always like unbalance. I don't want to hear one thing rather than the other to sound like that, because that's how I work.
So let's get to after the war. I started writing and recording. Did you have any sense that Gary was getting a bit frustrated with the hard rock thing, or not really?
I was a bit surprised.
Oh, no, sure.
I know Bob was sort of saying to Gary, you ought to do a blues album. They would do long sort of jams at sound checks. And I think by that point, I mean, I had reached a point there where I'd had enough of playing at that point, to be honest.
Okay.
Although the sort of spirit was there and willing, and the flesh was willing, but the spirit was waning a bit. And that final tour, because I played so much keyboards and was rooted to the spot, I didn't enjoy it as much.
Oh yeah, you definitely didn't play as much guitar on that '89 tour.
I just don't play guitar. That's why I feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So I was getting more and more sort of keyboarding. And I didn't really know that he was that fed up with it, but he would do a lot of blues playing, and they would do these jams, and I would, vote with my feet and disappear, leaving.
Right.
I know. It's not for me. 3 chords are not for me. It's great if you can do it and you do it beautifully or whatever, but it's just not me. So that's how it is. So, but I was surprised he was so fed up with it. I didn't know exactly.
If we go to the writing of that album, so you're co-writing something. You got "Speak for Yourself," I believe, right? Which is a real rocker. It's a great riff. Lead Clones, obviously, and then of course probably the most Thin Lizzy sounding song in Gary's catalog, in my opinion, "Blood of Emeralds," which I think it's almost like a hat tip to Black Rose, right?
That was how it came about. Actually, "Blood of Emeralds" is the most complete song that Gary had. The original demo, because he said, "Go away and write something Irish." So I went, write something Irish. So I went away, and that's what I came up with. And Gary added a dump to it, and the bit in the middle with the that was not sad, but the whole lot of the rest of it is something. Is like I said, it's a very rare event that was mostly what I'd written, and I got the original demo. And it's quite funny listening to it. Even that beginning bit with the it's actually verbatim. So I was quite chuffed he did it. I was quite chuffed he took that.
Yeah, I feel like that's a main track on that album and of that tour.
Well, it was really. I mean, I love that. I love that album, and I love that track. But you can't nick it. But it was a bit of a nod to it.
I sense that as well.
We'd done the thing with the Chieftains the year before, I think. I think it was the year before. And so that given me a bit of a kick, and we did a live thing on TV.
Yeah, I saw that on Irish television, right? It looked like absolute chaos, but it was brilliant.
Yeah, they were playing one song and we were playing another. It didn't matter because it all worked. But if you look at it, it's not, it's not actually the same thing. They're just, look at it now, mixed it up. But so that was giving me a bit of sort of direction towards that. And we did want. He was actually then moving into more of the sort of he liked the Sisters of Mercy, and he liked Billy Idol and all that sort of thing. So in a way, that was again moving into a bit harder edge, a bit more. So it's an album of sort of different things, and then it's got After the War, which has got from Monty Python's Life of Brian. No, the Holy Grail. It's got the beginning of that. Holy Grail. So
that's great. And so Lead Clones, were you involved in the sort of orchestration part of that? Because it's very Kashmir-like, obviously.
Andy Richards had those things. So Gary probably would have come up with the ideas.
Yeah.
It was Andy Richards on his posh thing,
Right.
But of course, I wasn't in the studio when I was a kid.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But in fact, I used to keep away a lot. Funny, I sort of just like to let Gary get on with it, and then I would come in and give a sort of he'd say, and so I was involved, but it really was Gary's album. It was a guy. I used to think they're Gary's albums, whereas with UFO, it's a completely different thing. It's a band.
Right.
It's really Gary's. What Gary wanted.
Yeah.
And with a bit of, sort of aid and abetting, so, which is fine, fine, work fine for me.
I feel like After the War is underrated album though in Gary's, because people often talk about Wild Frontier, as they should, but I think After the War is a great album. I think the production's really strong on that album. It's like today, it still sounds really good, I think.
Yeah, again, I don't listen to that often.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. Actually, it's quite nice. He put like Ready for Love, and he put Cozy playing on that, but over the drum thing. So he drummed to the drum track. And singing with Simon Phillips on Blood of Emeralds.
Yeah, which is incredible. I mean, that's Simon Phillips as well. I mean, what a drummer,
that is actually what Gary written. So Gary wrote the drum part with on the Roland Carriage, and they programmed it. And so I think quite a lot of that is what Gary come up with.
Interesting, yeah.
And that's made it so odd with Cozy, because Cozy, he didn't really want to play it.
The throwback to the Back on the Streets album, because Simon played on that as well, didn't he? So that takes it all the way back. Yeah, but then of course you got together for the '89 tour. The show that was filmed in Belfast, which I have a bootleg of, was that supposed to be a VHS? Do you know? Like, were they going to? Because it was professionally filmed, right? That concert.
The BBC, yes, it was, but it wasn't intended for release.
Okay.
And also bearing in mind that 5 months later, Gary suddenly.
Good concert too. I mean, it's nice to have that.
It is, it is. I mean, it was stressful because I think it was only the second one that Chris did with us, and it was really stressful. You can see the stress, look of concern. But it's a good looking show. So it looks pretty good. Unfortunately, again, for me personally, it's keyboard.
Sure.
Yes, it's a shame not to have the stuff on.
Throwing back for a second to the other ones, like the Emerald Isles and of course the Stockholm, do you personally, when you know the show's being filmed and audio recorded for release, does it affect you at all, or are you just not worried about it?
Actually, I think with the Ireland one, it was done over several shows.
Right.
So we did do some different. I think although a lot of it is from King's Hall or the Oyster Hall, we did. I think they filmed all the way through. Whereas with the ice stadium, it's like get it right. Oh, let's get it right. Should get it right. And in fact, I mean, obviously, it was a little bit tweaked. When you go. Review it. I mean, Gary, I didn't redo anything, but Gary did. He did a couple of bits and pieces. But it's a live thing. So it's the essence of how we sounded live, which is pretty good actually.
Really. Amazing.
I mean, that's no more than Gary would want.
Sure.
It's that would be what Gary would expect, because that's how we roll, So
there are some shows in the '89 as well where it seems like you sing a bit more.
I do have a memory. I honestly have a memory, but I don't have a pinpoint perfect memory about things. So I can picture a few of those gigs.
Yeah.
But it's very weird. It's just a very weird thing, and because it ended so abruptly. That was the other. It was just weird. It's almost like I sort of shut it off for a long time. It's like I would liken it to. I mean, I don't feel poorly about it, but I liken it. In Roadrunner, where the Roadrunner's going, he comes to the edge of a cliff, and he goes out and he's still running.
Yeah,
and it's a bit like that for me. That I sort of found myself thinking, what do I do now? And I have having said that, at no point did I want to find a band or make a band or join a band, or I just needed a rest from it. I've had a lot of years with UFO where we tour for months and months and months and actually get no one. So I was always very well looked after with Gary, but those things take their time.
Absolutely,
days in America, 6-7 months, of getting just a wage, when you got there was no merchandise coming through. None of the stuff that we get now, we just didn't see any of it. It just went into Rachel Lee's black hole, which we had no accounts and nothing, and it was only towards the end of the event that we actually said, hold on a minute, and then it was too late. The late 90s, they were just in debt, and I don't know how. it was battle fatigue. I just had enough of doing it, and I'd met my partner, and I was quite happy to do domestic bliss.
In this, when you started teaching at Brighton College?
I did, because I had no qualifications. So I started doing a bit of teaching, which I quite enjoyed. And me being the, if there's a mountain to climb, I'll get up it, I'll get the cramp. And I actually found it really fired something up in me. Stupidly, but it fired something up in me. And so I took my teaching diploma. And then I was called, everything I flew into things. So I was called by Brighton College to say they needed a clarinet teacher.
You moved to Brighton, was that?
I moved to Brighton all the time. I lived in London for a little while, but I lived in Brighton since 1980.
I was there in June, funnily enough. My best friend lives in Brighton. I'm from Margate originally, but I was down in Kent, and we went up to Brighton, and we actually visited Gary's resting place, which I hadn't done. So we went into the village and everything. It's a beautiful area, actually.
And you know what's very, very odd is that Phil Mogg lives two streets up and along.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I have a house in Saltley, which is next to it. So my house is now about a mile from Phil. I got a red tick up there, but it was just weird because Gary lived in Saltley for a while.
Yeah.
His connection to Rottingdean was nothing, but they just had a nice churchyard, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm going to see Gary today."
Oh, that's amazing. So you got a call from Brighton.
Needed a clarinet teacher, and I just went in again, fell into it, and ended up staying there 23 years, and had eventually I had so many pupils, there's 60 pupils, 5. I actually was 60, and the school got bigger and bigger and bigger and more successful. And I was made a full-time member of staff. So the last 10 years of the time there, I was head of the Winter Brass. It was just, I'd never planned it. It was just a dancing college for a while as well. But I never planned all this. Coming full circle, Gary's children went to Brighton College, and Gary used to come into my office when he was waiting to pick up his daughter. And we used to just sit there. I mean, he was always oblivious to the fact I was meant to be teaching. Kick people out. We'd sit and talk for an hour or so. Yeah, it was really nice.
Had you been in contact with him previously?
At the beginning of the blues, we had a couple of calls at the beginning of the 90s. And then he called me 1995. I spoke to him. And then again, slowly but surely, we just got to see what he was writing. We just got to see each other.
97, he did The Dark Days in Paradise, which was kind of a rock album, more of like a modern rock thing. I wondered if maybe he'd called you for that.
No, I mean, it was only really where he called me on a very bad day and said, I'm going to do a tour. I'm going to do a rock tour. And I thought, well, that's nice, Gary. That's really, really nice. Not even thinking of it. I said, well, that'd be good for you, but just like that. And he said, do you fancy doing it? And I thought, and you think actually he bites his hand off, but in fact it's been so long that I wasn't even sure I could do it again. But I sort of said, well, let me think about it. And to be honest, I thought, well, why not? I'll do it. It's still full time at the college, so they were very understanding because I had to take time off to do it. And it was a nightmare. 6 months trying to juggle everything, but I did it. Did the rock tour, which went through from summer concerts, and festivals, and then Russia. A little period over where we were hoping to do an album, planning on doing an album, and then it got into the new year, and the drummer wasn't going to do it anymore, so he was going to get a new drummer, and they rehearsed, but because I had examining. He did a tour of Japan. In fact, that was going to be a rock tour. But someone said to me, well, you've never played the blues stuff in Japan. So he took the blues, skipped the blues thing up to do the scene. But it was an experience. It was an experience to do it again. It really was.
Did you have input on the new songs like Days of Heroes and what was it, Wild One and Where Are You Now?
He rewrote Days of Heroes. He did the demos for those in 2005.
It would have been great to hear the studio versions of those.
Yeah, no, I do have them, but no one will prize them out of me because I think I've been asked so many times, and I get sometimes to let them loose. But actually, the old Wild one is very good. really, really good.
Oh,
And it's releasing, I think. I've been in contact with his son recently, and I forgot to say to him, really, you should think about releasing this.
Yeah, I'm officially reminding you, Neil.
I've never let
Yeah.
go. I can't. It's not- Yeah. But anyway, yes. So the demos of this. So we did those 3 songs, and we did some of the stuff from 1997 and a bit, and then Gary felt he had to do Still Got the Blues, and he had to do Walking By Myself, which didn't sit quite as well with me. Yeah, that was because they're big tunes. So it was a bit weird, and it's a bit weird because Brazilian Walkways and Still Got the Blues have the same chord progression. For me, being back into it, there was one night when I started Brazilian Walkways instead of Still Got the Blues. I couldn't actually find out where I was going because it was, and they're the chords from Blue Bossa.
On that tour, he sort of turned the second half of Parisian Walkways into like the way he would do the Loner and really stretch out. And it was amazing.
It's quite one epic.
Recording of the Trondheim show, which I think was really, really good. And I would say that, it's great to have the Montreux because it's captured, but maybe that wasn't the best night of the tour.
I think I said there were better nights than that, but it was just the only one that was.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's nice that people got that.
Yeah.
The Trondheim was the first one. It's just like, here we go.
Yeah.
Walking on 22 years later.
You sound great on that stuff, and your vocals still there. I mean, that's must have been a little challenging to get right back to that.
It's a bit unfortunate. I should have stood my ground a bit more, but I never used to sing Thunder Rising as it is on the album. I was just slightly alter the note because it's a note that Gary got in the studio that most people can't really get. So I said, Gary, I'll sing it how I used to. Oh, no, try and sing it like it is. And of course, the Montreux that I'm going, it's high. It's really high.
Yeah.
None of this do tuning the semitone. It was at the normal pitch, So whereas we play now and played semitone lower.
The echoes on Wild Frontier and the last part and the way you sing back and forth on Thunder Rising. I mean, to me, your voice on those songs is super iconic. Like it really is part of that sound.
Yeah, it wasn't for my keyboard playing skills. You could have probably had Don Airy for that, but for me, it's just really what I do fits in. It's a bit like playing a rhythm guitar. And it's the same with UFO. It's sort of very much like a rhythm guitar. So it colours the sound differently.
The 2010 tour. I mean, you're glad you did it.
In retrospect, I was a bit like a square peg in a round hole. My mentally, I moved on a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Gary could be very, very sweet and could be very kind and warm. But I just found the whole thing a bit boring. I don't get specifics, but I just found it. I didn't live in that world. Very different world. And it was very. But having said that, when I went back to UFO, which was a very long time in between, it was a completely different feeling because again, it's more of a band. Though Gary and I had shared sense of humour, when you've got a band that have actually all got the same stuff, there's no worry about if someone forgets a lyric or someone forgets something. There's no angst about that. Whereas Gary was always very particular about it. More on it. Whereas with UFO, it's easier because you could just just blow that.
So how did the UFO thing come about after? What was the gap there?
I decided I was becoming like one of those funny old music teachers. Oh, Mr. Carlton. So I just thought I travelled in a role too long. So in 2014, we moved down to Lanzarote to our place here, and I kept the one in England for a while, but in the end it was costing money just to keep it. So we rented it out to a Brian home album player, which was really good because he was hardly ever there. I just decided to have enough. Really, I'd had enough of teaching. I didn't want to hear the saxophone ever again. We just wanted to about 55. So it's so it was quite but not a bold move. It was just a natural to do. My partner, was a harpist and a lot of weddings, working really hard. He just so it was quite just a conscious decision to start.
Yeah.
It's quite a big wrench in Robin Cottage. I was part of furniture, but that was part of the reason I left. Because I just too long in the run.
And when the UFO thing came along, did you have any hesitation, or were you like, no, I'm going to do this?
lying on. So I was examining in the UK, funny enough, it went, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, there we are. I don't think it was Margate, might have been Margate. And I saw that they were doing their final tour. And what is bizarre is the fact that UFO ended really badly the first
Yeah.
really, although some of us got on, Phil and the rest of us weren't doing really well. I just thought, I'm going to go and see them. I went into London, travelled up from where I was in Kent, and I thought, I'm going to go see them for the last time. And my cousin does the merch. She's been doing the merchandise for years, and she got me a ticket. And I saw Clive Edwards, who I'd not seen for a long time, who was also on UFO. So a lot of people that I hadn't seen for a long while. Didn't get to see them because I had to leave early. And I just thought, I was watching all these people who looked like me in the audience, having just the greatest time. And it was the warmth that was going backwards and forwards between the two. And I'd never really seen them before. Apart from, I think I saw them once. And Phil had his stand-up routine, and he was just so good. And so, unfortunately, Paul Raymond died.
Yeah.
10 days, 12 days afterwards, I think, something like that. And they knew I'd been there. And I think Phil just thought, I wonder if you'll do it. And so that was how it happened. And I snatched her off. I thought about it for a minute and I thought, this would be good. But I loved it. Just appointed that we had to stop. First time because of the pandemic, and then the second time for being well. And we would have carried on doing more.
Yeah.
I think because nothing against Paul Raymond. Paul Raymond was an integral part. But it just sort of slightly brought something different to them. They just started having more fun.
Yeah, I've seen footage of you and Vinny playing, some harmony parts, and it looks like you're having a blast.
And Phil was just so wonderful. I laughed and laughed and laughed. I have not laughed so much since the time between the tour. Paul Chapman died, and then Pete Way died as well.
Yeah,
but they're all dropping off the dish. It's sort of time where people are not going to be around anymore. Really, I'm glad I had a chance to do it and reconnect with them.
You were at Brighton. Did any of your students ever reference the heyday of the 80s and some of the outfits?
It was just at the beginning of the internet. Two things were. One day, one of the boys came in and he had a bit of a Wikipedia page that he printed out. He said, "Is this you?" Yeah, and I didn't even know about Wikipedia. I just went, what's right? And then the funniest thing was the padre, the vicar, at the school, took him about 6 months. And then he said to me, "Neil, you're not related to Neil Carter who's from UFO." "Oh, no, it's me." And he went white. And he did a couple of Hail Marys, I think. And he said to me, "I was at Reading when you headlined with UFO. As a student, I was sat in the crowd." I said, "Yeah." I was standing in this erstwhile. I remember he said there were 3 either parachutes or helium balloons that spelled UFO. And just before you went on, the U went off that way, and you were just left with FO. That sounds like UFO perfectly. The bad luck of UFO. The U went off in the air. The director of music as well had been quite famous. So, but the kids in the latter days, when I was a house tutor, they used to say, "Can you give the boys a talk and tell them about their life?" And you were thinking, I don't want to get the excitable guitar players. So
they're all going to quit school.
And in fact, I judged the music competition one year, and the bands, the rock bands, just thought I would do that. Gary's son Jack was one of the bands that played in the lineup. It's very strange.
Got a career now, and he's doing that. Gary's daughter sings as well. Right?
Jack's daughter was doing extremely.
She's got a really nice voice.
Yeah, she has. She was opening for, I won't say Duration, but it's not. But anyway, she was opening for him at the on a tour. So she was doing extremely well. But actually, I've not heard much of her since the pandemic. So I don't quite know what she's doing.
Yeah.
But I know Gus and Jack are sort of involved in music.
Yeah, that's really nice.
I think Gus goes out and does some good stuff.
And how did Mog's Motel come about?
Good old Mox Motel. Well, we sort of knew Phil was talking about it when I joined the band again, and he was saying, I want to do an album, but I don't want to do a UFO album. And I said, oh, so yeah, have you got anything? Have you got any ideas?
Yeah.
So I thought, because I was suitably detached from it. And he was working with this guy, Tony Newton, who works with Cater Downey. And he said, yeah. So I sent him, and over the course of the pandemic and in between tours, I'd send him bits and pieces. And then it took 5 years. It took 5 years to happen. But in fact, the net result, I was really pleased with. I was really chuffed. And actually to have a physical album in front of me that I played on in 2020, whatever it was quite unexpected. I never expected to be doing this now. And in fact, we're working on some more tracks, whether Phil was talking about doing my days, but I don't think he feels comfortable. It's not 100%. It's all right, he's all right, but I think that exertion in doing this, we didn't want to tour.
Yeah.
So to just do the odd show is such a big effort.
Sure.
So I think doing the videos, I think he surprised himself doing videos.
Yeah, those videos came out nicely, didn't they? Yeah.
Years ago. He said, I've never done one before. I said, Phil, we did 2 in 1982.
And stuff. Were you occasionally writing music? I mean, was there ever going to be a Neil Carter solo album across the years? Or?
So I can't imagine myself doing it. I have loads of stuff. I have loads of it. And I've had loads of time. And I still can't make myself do that. And I think it's basically because I don't have confidence with the sound of my own voice. And did
a great job on the Bob Daisy's tribute album.
Yeah, I was like I was a bit dubious about doing that, but I just don't like the sound of my voice. It's terrible. So for me not to like that, I can't. I've done demos and obviously I've worked on stuff here, but I don't have the hunger for it. If I did, I'd be doing it.
Yeah.
Wanted to go and climb Everest, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't have the hunger. Makes it a less of a possibility.
Oh, well, sure.
Throw the idea when I get stuff out from years ago. I've got piles of them. But, I just don't. Weird one.
Yeah.
Like I said, if I wanted to do it, I'll do it. And I might at some point.
You've had an amazing career, but often as sort of a collaborator rather than the band leader, right? Gary Moore's music wouldn't have been the same without you, and neither would UFO and everything else,
Thank you. I think my job, my role is not to be standing centre stage. I said that before. But, I don't, it's not uncomfortable doing. I'm much better, being supportive. And some people say, I heard, occasionally over the years you get negative comments about stuff like that. But in fact, really, if you know your role and you're comfortable in it, stick with it. That's for me.
Yeah.
There's no point in me saying, I want to be this and I want to be that. No, I know that, and my strength lies in supporting. And the band here, my Spanish is all right, but it's not perfect. But they didn't know for a long time that this is what I did.
Right.
When UFO came up, I had to say, I'm sorry, I won't be here for 2 months. There wasn't going on. And they said, and they Googled and they YouTube and all this sort of thing. And they was like, they had no idea. Because I'm quite quiet. I'm quite good at anyone that's sort of flashy, So it's quite funny. It was quite funny. They all just suddenly went, they look at me differently now. So some of the characters I've seen over the years, I just you come back down to earth. If you're down to earth, and again, it's you survive it. You survive it because there's a lot of stuff along the way that, especially back in the early 80s. There was a lot of going on. So
sure,
if you can survive it, great.
Yeah, I would come home from school and I would go upstairs and play guitar. And then my mum and dad would say, it's dinner time. I would come downstairs, spend a few minutes with mum and dad, and then I'd put the Live in Stockholm theatre. This is every day, Neil, and I would watch the whole thing every day. I have every frame. It's crazy. But my friend, when I told my friend I was going to be speaking to you, please excuse the silliness, but he goes, you've got to ask him about those clips he had on his shirt. In the 80s, people often wore quite puffy shirts, right? And so was it a necessity?
It was a fashion thing, I think. That you rolled the sleeve up and then you clipped it You know,
Ah,
and
yes.
I've still got them somewhere. Yeah, so I keep everything. But yeah, and the tie, the bolo tie, that I think that was somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's just those they were quite. I mean, it got worse. I mean, some of the outfits. In fact, some of the outfits before that time were pretty out there, and
Yeah.
then some of the outfits on the final tour were a bit chainy and a bit heavy metal, a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's good to have the outfits and really, you know, I part of the fun of it, you know.
It's honest though, like what you said at the very beginning about bands like Bowie and Queen and stuff. I mean, that's all part of the mystique as well, isn't it?
I mean, I sort of hung on every single note of Queen when I was younger.
Oh
I
yeah.
went 4 nights to Hammersmith to see them, 4 nights in a row. She said, was it the Bohemian Rhapsody? Might be the Bohemian Rhapsody. Anyway, it was 4 nights running, night of the opera tour.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just didn't, it was just what I wanted. That was what I wanted. When the minute I saw them, it was what I wanted. You know, I would, in fact, we did with Gary, we did 3 dates with them on their final tour. And we did some massive places in Germany and in one in Sweden. And I just thought, well, this is it now, I've done it. You know, I don't have to worry anymore. I've reached all my little goals, my little hill, I've climbed my little hill, and I'm now opening for Queen, you know, to 90,000 people. And that, you know, I think it couldn't get much better than that after that. I think it was like everything was a bit of a disappointment after that.
It's so surreal, right? I mean, I've had a few little moments like that with playing with certain people, and you do it, and then afterward, it's very strange, you know. Did you get to interact with Queen, the guys in Queen?
Roger Brian, I've never spoken about. I mean, I would be tongue-tied.
Yeah, yeah.
Brian, I sort of made eye contact a couple of times. I couldn't. I met, I think it was, I met 2 people, you know, who meet heroes, but I met Vic Ronson, who was my biggest hero. We did a show, we did a TV show in Germany with Gary about 1986 or 7. And Brian Ferry was sat in the row behind me, and we'd done a show with Brian Ferry. And again, I just thought, and I couldn't string a sentence. I wanted to talk to him, and I couldn't. I just thought, and you just think people respect people's privacy as well as I was.
Sure, yeah.
You know, because you have to be, you know, you have to be quite comparison to Ferry. But you know, you do get people that want to come and interact with you. You know, sometimes it's nice, sometimes you have to be really, you know, but always kind. You've got to be kind to people. You know, Gary didn't always get that. I used to carry the conversation. Be really rude, you know, and yet other times it'd be really lovely, you know. He was slightly behind back or something.
Yeah.
And people got different stories. Oh, I met Gary, it was absolutely lovely. I met him, he was a really rude, you know.
Living in America for 20 plus years, I sort of made it my mission with all the many students that a lot of them I meet, they only know Still Got the Blues, Gary. I've really made it my mission. I can't tell you how many times I've sent albums and links. One thing that does come up a lot though is a lot of people I've met saw Gary open for Rush.
We did the Coliseum. I think we did 3 nights at the Coliseum in the end, maybe 2 or 3. And all the big, huge places. I mean, everything was always huge. I mean, the ones with Ozzy with UFO were pretty huge. But yeah, no, the Rush tour with Gary was really good.
Yeah.
And it was a good mix of the band, you know, styles and bands. But yeah, we did loads of dates. We did the Texas Jam and we did the Cop Block. So we did Texas and Houston, these big shows and like these
amazing,
stadiums, you know, it was here, Gary, Bryan Adams and Rush and someone else, I can't remember. But it was, that was quite a thing, you know, because those shows were great. I mean, those days, I mean, really
incredible.
Really, I'm sure they're good now, but it's just I don't ever go to them. But
those really funny, iconic moments, like when you went on the kids' TV show Number 73.
Yeah, that was quite hysterical. Do you know, Gary did this thing on it where he played their doorbell. He played and he got royalties for it. I made sure that he got royalties every time they played that. It was there was very strange TV shows.
Yeah, like the Tube and Top of the Popsicles, you know.
Friday Night Live, Saturday Night Live, where you'd have comedians like Joe Collins Fan Club and Brian Laurie, and then there's a great one of us doing Wild Frontier with Eric, and it's got a big gorilla. Oh, it's hysterical.
Yeah.
There's a good old which Gareth Ferguson played.
Yeah.
And there's a Sight and Sound in concert as well, which is quite early. 1984, beginning of 1984.
Yeah.
It's quite a few things, if you
A favorite show that, for whatever reason, is kind of in your mind from those days?
oh, I suppose Ice Stadium, and also we played some. It was either Mannheim or there's pictures of it.
Was that 86, the Mannheim? Yeah, I got a recording of that one. Yeah, yeah.
That was probably my one that should have forget. I was wearing that here. No, it's but he that to me is one of those shows that you'll never forget.
Yeah, yeah.
Incredible.
And that was an outdoor.
Yeah, it was actually one. It might have been Nuremberg. I think it was where allegedly they had the Nuremberg rallies. One of those 90,000.
It was interesting because on that tour you were playing an early version of Wild Frontier that changed a little bit. Yeah. Which is cool.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to look at that.
Thank you so much for spending the time with me. It's a real thrill. It really is because Gary's music and all of your playing together and everything's been such a huge part of my life and so influential. I really do appreciate it. So you came into Gary's band 83, 84, and and it's a very hard rock then, the new wave of British heavy metal. It was all very macho. How did it work for you being a gay man in that situation?
No, in fact, actually, at that point, I was still married. So I didn't really, and I don't use the word come out. I did 3 years while I was on my own, and then I met my partner, and we've been together ever since. So it's now with 38 years.
Congratulations, that's great.
But I was, to be honest, it was a bit something that I'm sure Gary had twigged it, but I didn't ever act on it at all. But it was never a thing. I was also slightly aware of the fact he sort of twigged it. And in fact, Phil Miller was the first person to say to me, "You're gay." And I can't remember what I said now, but it was like, "Oh, don't say that." But it wasn't a big deal. I'm a very slow burning fuse. So I had, my ex-wife and I were on and off together for quite a long time. From about up to about 1985 or 6.
Yeah.
So, and then I had a few years of my own, and then that bit of a funny one to be gay. But having said that, then you've got people like Rob Halford.
Right.
I will tell a very funny story just to finish up. We started after the war in a studio in Denmark called Puck, and a band of metal band were in it the week before recording, and I think it was Judas Priest. I might be wrong, but Gary got into his room, and underneath the bed were piles of Leathermen magazine, the eclectic sort, and it just appalling. It's absolutely appalling. But having said that, years later, and Gary was always really nice to Andrew. But he was like, he had a lot of gay friends, and his wife was gay friendly. So it wasn't, and Brighton's not the sort of place you can not be aware of what's going on.
Sure.
And it's not something that I have ever, I was always interested probably more so than I am now. But yeah, it was never something I would read people's necks. You've got to accept new. It was almost at the end of my time anyway.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter,
Right.
I mean, Andrew came to see us a couple of times after the war, but we were just been together then.
Yeah.
So really, it was never really an issue. It wasn't happening. So
that's a pretty good footnote that the Phil Lynott was the person that said you were gay.
I think Phil would say things and sort of like a slightly winding you up.
Right.
So with a bit of humour. So but it was quite funny. Just thinking that he was the first person ever to actually ask me. But I must have been flaming about somewhere. A very different person to how I am now. I think that didn't that much.
Just all the best with future projects. I hope we do get to see a solo album one day.
Stranger things. I've said no and never so many times.
Don't sell your gear just in case. Don't sell your gear.
Does that say Bogner?
Yeah, Bogner. Yeah.
Is it from Bogner?
Oh, not Bogner Regis. No.
You said you were writing a book. Is that right?
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm writing a book for On Track, which is where I go through Gary's albums and talk about it. But the main book I'm writing, in depth look at Gary's technique. So I'm actually playing a lot of the stuff and sort of work out. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. It's a big project, but excited to be doing that. But yes, I will. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Great stuff. By the way, Rob, lovely to talk to you.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Appreciate it.